The morning the ambulance siren screamed through Umuahia town, nobody knew that the woman stepping out of it in a white coat was the same barefoot girl they once threw orange pills at. Nobody knew that 15 years earlier, they had spat on her slippers, laughed at her torn school uniform, and called her Akpa Oyebo, the fruit basket girl who would never amount to anything. But on that morning, as she knelt beside a dying old woman on the roadside and pulled her back from the edge of death with her bare hands, the whole market fell silent. And somewhere in that silent crowd, an old woman who had once slapped an orange out of her hand began to weep, because she finally recognized the girl she had humiliated. This is that story. Welcome to African Mystery Stories. If you're new here, kindly like, subscribe, and comment. And stay with us through this story. Her name was Adaeze. She was born in a small compound behind a palm wine bar in Umuahia, in the heart of Igbo land, where the red earth cracked under the harmattan sun and children ran barefoot between yam barns. From the time she could speak, Adaeze had one dream, and she said it with a boldness that made grown men chuckle and shake their heads. "I will become a doctor," she told her classmates one afternoon in primary 5, standing on a wooden bench so everyone could hear her. "I will build a hospital right here in Umuahia, and nobody will ever die again because they had no money." The other children laughed. Not the gentle kind of laughter, but the sharp kind that cuts. "Doctor," one boy sneered. "Your father cannot even buy you new sandals, and you want to be a doctor." Adaeze did not flinch. She simply smiled and said, "Watch me." Her father, Papa Emeka, was a palm wine tapper who woke before the cock crowed to climb tall trees with a rope tied around his waist. Her mother, Mama Ngozi, sold roasted corn and ube by the roadside. They were poor, yes, but their home was rich with something money could not buy: laughter, prayer, and the smell of fresh cassava bread on Sunday mornings. Every night, Papa Emeka would gather Adaeze and her younger brother, Chidi, around a small kerosene lamp and tell them, poverty is not a curse. It is only a season. But laziness, that is the real curse. Never be lazy with your dream. Adaeze believed him with her whole heart. Then came the rains of that terrible July. Papa Emeka went out to tap palm wine as he always did, but the rope slipped on the wet bark of an old palm tree, and he fell nearly 40 feet to the ground. By the time neighbors carried him home, his back was broken and his breath was shallow. There was no hospital nearby that would treat him without money up front, and by the time a kind trader offered to lend them enough for transport to the general hospital in Umuahia town, it was too late. Papa Emeka died on the way, in the back of a rickety Peugeot 504, his head resting on his wife's lap. The funeral drums beat for 3 days. Adaeze, only 13 years old, sat by the graveside and refused to cry in front of anyone. But that night, alone behind the house, she wept until her chest ached, whispering to the sky, "This is why I must become a doctor. So no other family will lose their father because there was no money." But grief was not finished with that family. 6 months later, Mama Ngozi began coughing blood. The village called it the sickness of sorrow, but it was tuberculosis, untreated and spreading. Without money for proper hospital care, she grew weaker by the week. Adaeze sold her school sandals to buy cough syrup from the chemist. She sold her only storybook. She sold the small gold earrings her father had given her mother on their wedding day. Nothing was enough. 3 months after her father's death, Mama Ngozi joined him in the earth. Adaeze was now an orphan at 13, with a 9-year-old brother clinging to her hand at the graveside, both of them standing under a grey Umuahia sky that seemed to weep along with them. Their grandmother, Mama Nkechi, a frail woman in her 60s, took them in. But her small hut and tiny pension from selling firewood could not feed 2 growing children and pay school fees. One evening, Mama Nkechi held Adaeze's face in her wrinkled hands and said, with tears in her eyes, "My daughter, I cannot afford to keep you in school any longer. Forgive me." Adaeze did not cry in front of her grandmother. She simply nodded and said, "Then I will sell fruits, Mama. I will find a way. But I will never stop dreaming of becoming a doctor." The next morning, Adaeze woke before sunrise, tied a wrapper around her small waist, balanced a tray of oranges, groundnuts, and bananas on her head, and walked to the busy roadside junction near St. Peter's Market. She was no longer the girl reciting her ambitions on a wooden bench. She was now Adaeze the fruit seller, and the same classmates who once mocked her dream now had new material. "Oh, look at the doctor," one girl jeered as she passed by in her school uniform, pointing at Adaeze's tray. "Doctor of oranges." The other students burst into laughter, and Adaeze's cheeks burned with humiliation, but she kept walking, kept calling out, "Fine oranges. Sweet groundnuts. Come and buy." Days turned into months. The sun blistered her skin. Rain soaked her wrapper. Motorists haggled her prices down to nothing, and sometimes drove off without paying at all. Market women mocked her for abandoning her age mates in school. One particular woman, a wealthy trader named Madame Beatrice who sold fabric 2 stores away, took special delight in humiliating her. "You this good-for-nothing girl," Madame Beatrice hissed one afternoon, slapping an orange out of Adaeze's tray so it rolled into the gutter. "You think fine dreams will feed you? Look at you, hawking oranges like a common street child. Better face your fruits and forget this doctor nonsense." Adaeze bent down, picked up the bruised orange from the gutter, wiped it on her wrapper, and placed it gently back on her tray. She did not respond with anger. She simply said, "Good afternoon, Ma," and walked on to the next customer, her jaw tight, her eyes stinging with tears she refused to let fall in public. That night, she sat with Chidi under the moonlight, cradling him as he cried from hunger, and she made a silent vow. "One day, Omohia, you will remember me differently." For 2 long years, Adaeze balanced her tray under the sun, feeding her brother, paying Mom and Nkechi's small debts, and quietly reading old textbooks by candlelight after everyone else had slept. She had not given up on school. She simply had no way back until the day everything changed. It was a Friday afternoon, the market bursting with noise and dust, when a sleek black SUV pulled up near her usual spot. Out stepped a well-dressed man in his 50s, Chief Okonkwo Iminaik, a wealthy industrialist known throughout Abia State for his textile factories. He had stopped to buy suya from a nearby vendor, and in his hurry, he left his briefcase resting on the hood of his car while he crossed the road. Adaeze noticed it immediately. Inside, through the half-open zip, she could see stacks of naira notes, more money than she had ever seen in her entire life. Enough to pay Chidi's school fees for years. Enough to buy new sandals, new wrappers, even to start a small shop. Her heart pounded. For one long, agonizing moment, she stared at that briefcase, and the market noise seemed to fade into silence. She thought of her mother's dying words, "Never let poverty steal your honesty, Ada. That is the only wealth nobody can take from you." Adaeze picked up the briefcase, cradled it against her chest, and pushed through the crowd toward the man just as he turned back toward his car, patting his pocket in sudden panic. "Sir," she called out, breathless. "Is this yours?" Chief Iminaik turned, and his face went through disbelief, then astonishment, then something close to shame. That is my briefcase," he stammered, staring at the money still intact inside. "Young girl, do you know how much is in there?" "I did not count it, sir," Adaeze said simply. "It is not mine to count." The chief stood frozen for a long moment, studying her worn wrapper, her bare feet, the tray of fruit balanced nearby, the quiet dignity in her tired eyes. "What is your name?" he asked slowly. "Adaeze, sir." "Why are you not in school, Adaeze?" And there, in the middle of a noisy Umuahia market, surrounded by traders who had mocked her for 2 years, Adaeze told a stranger the story she had never told anyone in full: her father's fall, her mother's cough, her grandmother's tears, her broken dream of the white coat. Chief Iminaik listened without interrupting, his jaw tightening with every sentence. When she finished, he did not say much. He simply nodded, thanked her again, and drove away. Adaeze assumed that was the end of it, a strange, brief encounter she would tell her grandmother about that evening, nothing more. But 3 days later, the same black SUV pulled up outside Mama Nkechi's small hut. Chief Iminike stepped out, this time with a folder of documents. Mama Nkechi nearly fainted when he explained why he had come. "Your granddaughter is the most honest child I have met in 30 years of business," he said. "I want to sponsor her education, secondary school, and if she performs well, university as well. Medical school, if that is truly her dream." Mama Nkechi collapsed to her knees, weeping and thanking God, thanking the ancestors, thanking the chief over and over. Adaeze stood frozen at the doorway, her tray of fruits forgotten in her hands, tears finally falling freely down her face, not tears of sorrow this time, but tears she had been holding back for 2 long years. "Is this real?" she whispered. "Very real," Chief Iminike said, smiling. "Honesty like yours deserves a future." The following Monday, Adaeze walked into her old secondary school in a crisp new uniform, her books tucked under her arm. The whispers started immediately. "Isn't that the fruit seller? How is she back in school?" Adaeze held her head high, took her seat, and opened her book. It was not easy. She had missed 2 years of coursework, and she struggled at first, staying awake past midnight, still helping her grandmother sell fruit on weekends to keep some income flowing. Some classmates still mocked her, calling her orange girl the behind-cupped hands. But her favorite teacher, Mr. Namdi Achebi, pulled her aside one afternoon. "Adaeze," he said, "greatness is never convenient. The people laughing today will be asking for your autograph tomorrow. Keep your head down and your books open." She took his words like scripture. By the end of that first term, she ranked 3rd in her class. By the following year, she was first, and she stayed first until graduation, emerging as the best graduating student in her set, with a scholarship offer from the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, waiting for her. The years that followed unfolded like a montage of quiet triumph. Long nights in cramped hostel rooms, textbooks stacked to the ceiling, instant noodles eaten cold because there was no time to cook. Anatomy lectures that left her hands trembling with exhaustion. Clinical rotations in crowded teaching hospitals where she watched surgeons save lives with steady hands, and she promised herself she would learn to have hands just as steady. There were moments she nearly gave up, the semester she failed a pharmacology exam and cried herself to sleep, convinced she was not good enough. The week Chidi fell seriously ill and she had to choose between visiting him and sitting a crucial practical exam. But every single time despair crept close, she remembered the gutter, the bruised orange, and Madame Beatrice's sneering voice, and something inside her hardened into pure, unshakable determination. 6 years after the black SUV pulled up outside a fruit stand, Adaeze Emeka graduated from medical school with distinction. At her white coat ceremony, as the dean called her name and the auditorium erupted in applause, she scanned the crowd until she found the 2 faces she was searching for, Mama Nkechi, now bent with age but beaming with pride, and Chief Iminike, sitting beside her, wiping his eyes with a handkerchief. Chidi, now a tall young man studying engineering on the same sponsorship, stood and cheered louder than anyone in the room. Dr. Adaeze Emeka completed her housemanship in Lagos, then her residency in internal medicine, turning down lucrative job offers from private hospitals in the city, offers that would have made her wealthy within a few short years. Every single time, she remembered her promise at the graveside of her father: no family should ever lose a parent simply because there was no money for treatment. So instead, 7 years after leaving Umuahia as a struggling teenager, Dr. Adaeze Emeka returned home. She did not return quietly. With funding from Chief Iminike, from a foundation grant she had personally written and fought for, and from her own hard-earned savings, she built a modest but fully equipped clinic just 3 streets from the market where she once sold oranges. She named it Mama Ngozi Medical Center, after her late mother, with a small plaque at the entrance that read, "For every family who was told there was no time, no money, no hope." The morning of the clinic's opening, the entire market gathered, drawn by the commotion of a brass band and a red ribbon stretched across the entrance. Word had spread that a new doctor had returned to open a free health center for the poor, but almost nobody in that crowd realized who she truly was, until she stepped out of the front doors in her white coat, stethoscope draped around her neck, and the market fell into stunned, disbelieving silence. That's Adaeze," someone whispered. "The fruit seller," another voice gasped. Madame Beatrice, older now, her once sharp voice frail with age, pushed through the crowd, her hand trembling over her mouth. She had heard the rumors but refused to believe them until she saw Adaeze's face with her own eyes. Shame washed over her so completely that her knees nearly buckled. But before Madame Beatrice could say a word, chaos erupted at the edge of the crowd. An elderly woman collapsed near the roasted corn stand, clutching her chest, gasping for breath. Panic rippled through the market as people shouted for help, for a car, for anyone who could do something. Dr. Adaeze did not hesitate. She dropped her ribbon-cutting scissors, tore through the crowd, knelt in the dust beside the dying woman, and began walking, checking her pulse, clearing her airway, calling out sharp, clear instructions to her nurses who came running from the clinic with an emergency bag. Minutes stretched like hours as the market watched in breathless silence, the same silence that had once mocked her now holding its collective breath in awe. The old woman's eyes fluttered open. She gasped, coughed, and breathed. Alive. The market erupted, not in laughter this time, but in tears and thunderous applause. And as Dr. Adaeze rose slowly to her feet, brushing dust from her white coat, she looked directly at Madame Beatrice, who was now weeping openly, mouthing silent apologies through her tears. Dr. Adaeze walked toward her, and the older woman flinched, expecting anger, expecting revenge finally delivered. Instead, Adaeze gently took her trembling hands and said, "Come inside, Ma. Let us check your blood pressure. You have been on your feet too long today." Madame Beatrice broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. "I insulted you," she wept. "I threw your orange in the gutter. I told you your dreams were nonsense. Why are you not angry with me?" Dr. Adaeze smiled softly, the same quiet dignity she had carried since childhood still glowing in her eyes. "Ma, if I carried anger for everyone who doubted me, I would have no room left in my heart for healing. You did not know the fruit girl would become the doctor. Nobody did. Not even me, some days. But God knew." That afternoon, the Momangozi Medical Center officially opened its doors, and within its first month, it had treated over 300 patients free of charge, the elderly, the poor, mothers with sick infants, farmers injured in accidents just like her father once was. Mr. Namdi Achebi, her old teacher, now retired, visited every week just to sit in the waiting room and tell new patients proudly, "I taught that girl. I always knew she would come back for us." Chidi, now a civil engineer, designed an extension wing for the clinic, a maternity ward built entirely in their mother's honor, where no woman in Umuahia would ever again die from a treatable illness for lack of funds. Years later, children in Umuahia grew up hearing Dr. Adaeze's story not as legend, but as living truth, because she was still there, still walking the same market roads each morning, still greeting former mockers with the same gentle grace, still reminding every child who dared to dream beyond their circumstances that shame could not survive where courage refused to bow. One evening, a little girl selling groundnuts beside the clinic gate looked up at Dr. Adaeze with wide, hopeful eyes and asked the same question so many had asked before. "Can someone like me really become a doctor one day?" Dr. Adaeze knelt down slowly, met the girl's gaze with warmth, and said the words that would echo through Umuahia for generations to come. "My dear, they will laugh at you today and call your name tomorrow. Dreams do not ask where you come from. They only ask if you are brave enough to keep walking. I sold oranges on this very road once. Today, I heal the same people who once laughed at me. Your beginning is not your ending. Never let anyone convince you otherwise." The little girl smiled, picked up her tray, and walked on with her head held just a little higher. And somewhere behind them, the market of Umuahia continued its noisy, beautiful rhythm, the same market that once mocked a barefoot orphan girl, now proudly claiming her as its own. If this story moved you, don't scroll away just yet. Smash that like button, subscribe to African Mystery Stories if you haven't already, and drop a comment telling us which part touched you the most. Was it the orange in the gutter? The white coat ceremony? Or the moment she saved a stranger's life in the very market that mocked her? Let us know below, and stay tuned, because we have many more powerful stories like this one coming your way. See you in the next story.